Welcome to the show, everyone. This is JR, founder and CEO of Social Market, here with another episode for the Social Ledger Report. My partner couldn't join me right now because he's busy, so I pretty much will be running this solo. However, before I get started, I just want to share with you all that as of September, we will be starting a new approach for the podcast. We want to do a live stream. So if you all want to see us live and maybe even interact with us in the chat, drop a comment, let us know what you think. If you'd like to be a part of it, if you'd like to maybe have an interview while we're there, everything is up in the air. So we're happy to take any suggestions of what we could do. So with that said, even though I'm running things alone, we still have a wide array of things to cover. But before I do that, leave a like in the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot and it costs you nothing. So first we'll talk about JP Bank. That's Japan Post Bank. What they're doing is they are going digital. They're releasing a $1.3 trillion effort to release a digital yen that is pegged one by one. I know a few weeks ago we talked about the Chinese yuan that was doing that, where they're releasing a stable coin. So that's really interesting, seeing that Japan is now doing that. Next, we're going to talk about the United States Department of Commerce. It's going on chain. So what they're doing is they're going to be releasing some of their consumer data or some data related to the economy on chain or on the blockchain. And there's a lot of competitors trying to beat the blockchain where they're going to do that. Next, we're going to talk about some scams. We're going to do some true crime sort of podcast is going to be this episode. We're going to talk about a group of scammers pretend to be Mr. Beast and in the end steal over 1.25 million from a tech CEO. I think the tech CEO is from somewhere in Europe, and he founded Great.com, which is more of a casino. So either way, he got scammed, and that's what we're going to talk about. Our next story, we'll talk about BlockDAG. It's a layer 1 blockchain. They recently raised a round of $387 million, and this put a whale to put $4.4 million of their own money into this blockchain, which is really interesting. Going to cover more of possible insider trading or possible investments that's happening behind the scenes with that. And then our last story, Kanye. I believe someone impersonated him. I've looked everywhere, and the person or group behind the Yeezy token, they scammed a lot of people, and there could be some correlation with the Argentina Libra scam that took place earlier this year. We're going to cover legal, big news, all the way to, scams and potential insider trading. So definitely a wide array of topics here. But with that being said, we need to cover what's happening in the markets. But first, I should note that this is our development environment where we are making some updates. So you might notice that the UI is a little bit different, and a little bit more on that later. So right now, we're seeing the market's leaning more towards altcoins and Bitcoin. So it's interesting. It looks like fear is still at 39%, or it's leaning more on fear. So people are more fearful in the markets. Inflation is still right around 3%. The assets here, traditional assets, looking at the S&P 500, it's at 6,460. And we have the Dow Jones sitting at $456. And then as for NASDAQ or QQQ index, we're looking at $570. And the price of gold right now, it's sitting at $3,407. So this is kind of just the overview. For those listening in on the podcast with Spotify or Apple Podcasts, kind of just give you the numbers here of where the market is sitting. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can kind of see for yourself. All right, so now into the crypto markets. So first, just to showcase here some of the UI updates, you can always look at it later this week on app.socialmarket.tech. We released our new updated website at socialmarket.tech. You can go ahead and look at it whenever you want. But anyways, the price of Bitcoin right now, sitting at about $109,071. And we're seeing, as of the last 5 days, it peaked at 114,000. It's now sitting at about 109,000. I know there were a few articles on Twitter or X, and Michael Saylor were saying that, hey, Bitcoin is decreasing in price, so you can go ahead and buy it while it's on sale. And I think we might see a trajectory of the price going lower and lower, which means that a lot of people are going to be buying more and more Bitcoin. So do what you will with that kind of information. But yeah, so this is pretty much the market overview. On to our first story. So first, we're going to talk about JP Bank. And this is from Whale Insider on X. It says just in. And actually, this was just in this morning. So, when I'm as a recording of this podcast. But Japan Post Bank, one of Japan's largest institutions, to create the digital currency in 2026 and may allow users to trade blockchain-based products with it. And this is per Nikkei. So a couple of thoughts on that. So I think it's interesting how Japan is now positioning themselves to release their own stable coin that is backed by their national currency. What's interesting is a lot of people don't know this, but Japan has kind of been ahead for a long time on the race to crypto adoption. And I say race because, when you have different countries, fighting to be ahead, that's when it becomes a race. Now, for a long time, it was only Japan, I believe, that was the only country in the world that was embracing crypto to what it could be. And now it's interesting to see that it's starting to fall behind, maybe because Trump and the United States current administration is really serious about it. They are putting money on, crypto adoption, as far as lobbying, as far as, improving the financial system, as we know. So really is interesting to see that Japan is trying to come back into relevance by releasing this stablecoin. What this means is because they're trying to revitalize the presence with crypto, the JPB or Japan Post Bank, it's actually putting $1.3 trillion. I believe that's in US dollars. It's kind of hard to find anything anywhere except for this article here. So here it is, the digital currency to revitalize $1.3 trillion in deposits. Bank aims for quick trading of security tokens and NFTs. So one more thing I'll mention is I have Line. Think of it like WhatsApp or like Facebook Messenger. It's like Japan's most used form of communication. And what's interesting is Line, it allowed people to buy NFTs by connecting their wallets. I never used it to buy NFTs. I always use like OpenSea or anything that I'm very well aware of. So really, there's a lot of speculation here. There's a lot of things that we don't know what could happen. NFTs are starting to come back. At the very beginning, NFTs were kind of seen as this commodity, almost speculative. And then, they blew up in 2021. But for a while there, people were buying into them, thinking that we're going to make a return. But along the way, people forget that this is just kind of like a piece of art. Line and Japan, I say Japan because of Japan Post Bank. But if they truly still believe in NFTs, who knows? Who knows what could happen? It would be interesting to see if you log into your bank account and you can see your NFTs there lined right next to your bank account, like you just got your paycheck, and then you can see like, hey, I got my paycheck, I could put this into NFTs. That's what I believe could happen in the near future with this route that they're taking. But I mean, everything is still kind of in the air, so we can only assume what could or could not happen. I do have one more article here where it kind of goes more into detail. I'm not going to read it because I kind of already gave you the synopsis or the TLDR. So feel free to look at this on YouTube if you have access to the link there. So that's pretty much everything to cover about JP Bank. Let us know what you think in the comments. On to our next story. We'll talk about the U.S. Department of Commerce to post data on chain. And this kind of took Twitter by storm. I interchangeably call Twitter next, so, hope no one is confused. But anyways, so this is from U.S. Commerce Department, the official account on X. It says, release, Department of Commerce posts second quarter gross domestic product to the blockchain. That was kind of a mouthful statement, but anyways. This is from Secretary Howard Lutnick. It's only fitting that the Commerce Department and President Trump, the crypto president, publicly releases economic statistical data on the blockchain. We are making America's economic truth immutable and globally accessible like never before, cementing our role as the blockchain capital of the world And everybody has to admit that 3.3% GDP growth is impressive. Well, that last remark was rather interesting or funny. But yeah, I mean, this is obviously a big deal. The fact that blockchains are finally starting to be used for what they were intended to is amazing. I think that was one of the biggest interests I had initially that drove me more into the space, is the understanding of what is possible. Blockchains are immutable systems that work like ledgers. You just store transactional data there. So a lot of it is just very similar to how a database operates. Not to confuse anyone, but I think it's very possible to store content and data on the blockchain, just as we're seeing here. One thing that drew me into the DeSo blockchain, or decentralized social blockchain, was that, it is one of the few blockchains that you can store mass amounts of text on the blockchain for relatively cheap prices. But obviously, DeSo hasn't gone anywhere right now, so suffice to say, they're not going to be the blockchain that's going to support this endeavor. In fact, there is right now an effort between Polygon and Chainlink, or at least as of CoinDesk. It says, breaking. Chainlink is partnering with the U.S. Department of Commerce to bring official government data on-chain, a first-of-its-kind movement that sent the Link token surging over 5%. So it's really interesting to see this coming from CoinDesk, saying that Chainlink is doing this. And then we have, this is from Polygon, the official account on X, saying, U.S. Department of Commerce will begin posting real GDP data on Polygon, turning economic data into an immutable global public good. And what's interesting is this is a screenshot from what appears to be from the Department of Commerce website. So I'm just going to read this for those listening on audio. It says, Department of Commerce posts second quarter gross domestic product on the blockchain. You already know that. And then it talks about, this is the first time a federal agency has published economic statistical data like this on the blockchain. In the latest way, the department is utilizing innovative technology to protect federal data and promote public use. I mean, I think it's interesting that they mention protect federal data, even though you're putting it out there. I mean, I guess the only thing you could protect when it comes to storing content on the blockchain is you can't really see who is sending that, but because we know it's coming from the Department of Commerce, you can kind of get an idea of what hypothetical address they're sending this to. So blockchains are just by default open ledgers. You can see where money is moving openly. So there's almost no privacy there once you know who is the people or person sending the data or transaction, In this case, it would be data. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But anyways, the department published an official hash of its quarterly GDP data released for 2025, and in some cases, the top line GDP number to the following 9 blockchains. So it looks like they're going to be releasing the same data on the GDP. It's going into several blockchains, which I think it's interesting that they're putting it on Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is not stable enough to store data or text-based data on the blockchain. But anyways, it says the 9 blockchains are Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Tron, Stellar, Avalanche, Arbitrum 1, Polygon POS, and Optimist. The data was also further decimated through coordination with the oracles Pi or Pith and Chainlink. The exchanges Coinbase, Gemini, and Kraken help facilitate the department's publishing. The department will continue to innovate the broadened scope of publishing future datasets like GDP to include the use of other blockchains, oracles, and exchanges. So that's kind of like the main meat and potatoes of this. So, I guess I was a little bit wrong. It doesn't look like they're competing to be the blockchain to store their content on. In fact, I think it's great that, they're using all these different blockchains to further release all their data. I think it's interesting that they're putting on the blockchain, but do you really need to put it on the blockchain? I think the main reason why people would want to put on the blockchain, I mean, right now it's kind of a flex, but also you want to have this data in an immutable system, in an immutable ledger where you can see the time period, you can see when this was posted, time period, you can see the contents. It'll be interesting. So this is from Chainblog. They talk about the same thing. You can read it more if you'd like. It talks a little bit more on the nuanced approach with Chainlink. And then this article is from CoinDesk. It says Chainlink and Pit selected to deliver US economic data on the blockchains. Yeah, so you can kind of get the gist. It looks like the government is putting their data and their content in all these different blockchains, which I think is interesting. I can see the value behind it. In theory, in practice, will remain to be seen. Because when you're storing content and data on the blockchain, you got to take into account gas fees. You got to take into account the UI. I don't know what their approach is. You can always put stuff on the blockchain, but if you're putting like large amounts of text, which I don't know how long the GDP info will be, how many pages of text it will be, or even if there's images, that can get expensive as far as gas fees, as far as the amount of time it would take to upload it on the blockchain. So this is just my technical brain thinking about it. Like, we'll see what happens, you know? I mean, I'm just the middleman telling you what's happening. So let us know what you think in the comments. Now, something I think will be a little bit more interesting, and this is kind of like the first time we're doing this, where we're talking about like true crime almost. So I was on Twitter. I was on X, whatever you want to call it. And I occasionally look at individual content from certain profiles. In this case, I was looking at ZachXBT. He is kind of like this journal or journalist or investigator on chain where he uncovers scams, inside trading, to name it. And he's actually grown popular over the years. He was once scammed, and that's kind of what led him to be this renowned investigator on the blockchains. I was looking into his profile and I came across into this thread. So this is from Eric Bergman. He founded Greg.com. And I haven't looked into Greg.com that much. I know it's a casino, but beyond that, I'm not entirely sure what it does. He's this rich guy who is trying to do good. And I read the entire thread. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I'll be brief. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can find the article to the thread. But anyways, I'll just read the first few lines. It says, I just got scammed for $1.25 million. I feel ashamed and stupid. This story starts with me getting a phone call from Mr. Beast and Mark Robber. They asked me to donate money to Team Water to build wells in Africa and help people get clean water. I'm surprised by their call. We've met before but haven't spoken in years. And then, if you're seeing this on YouTube, it's a huge, huge threat. And he kind of goes into detail what happened. He agreed to help Mr. Beast and Mark Robber with Team Water to bring wells into Africa. And I think that alone is amazing. You know, a lot of people may or may not like Mr. Beast just for how loud he can be or just the way he creates content. But, you know, I think him being one of the only people in the world that uses their money to actually help others. So whether you're like Mr. Beast or not, you know, he is amazing for what he's doing. But anyways, so he agreed to help out people. And unfortunately, he was approached by a group of people that were pretending to be Mr. Beast, Aiden Ross, Mark Robber, and other celebrities or influencers of the sort in this WhatsApp group. And here's the screenshot. If you're seeing this on YouTube, it says Team Water Top Gs. And then based on the screenshots, you're seeing Mark Robber, Team Water. I'm guessing someone who was posing as the admin for Team Water, Aiden Ross, Ed Craven, Mr. Beast, and that's it. And then including Eric Bergman. So this takes place over a retreat that Eric was in for the weekend. And effectively, this group chat, this WhatsApp group chat was popping off. On this thread, at some point it says, on Saturday, Jimmy writes in the chat and tells us about this other opportunity. He has just signed a deal with Coinbase, one of the largest crypto exchanges that will launch their own crypto coin. So first of all, he was lied to by Mr. Beast, or the person pretending to be Mr. Beast, I should say, was lying, saying, oh, hey, you know, I just talked to Coinbase. They're going to release their own token, and we should buy in early. So that's kind of like what started this scam. And this guy who was in the retreat, who had no time to think, kind of just followed along with who he thought was Mr. Beast. So he effectively put $1.25 million. So what kind of made this guy realize that he was being potentially scammed was after the retreat ended and he was heading home. According to his thread here, he says, I still have a good feeling about all of this and I'm excited. I'm also exhausted after the weekend. Lots of experiences to process and far little to sleep. And then the following Tuesday, Jimmy, or Mr. Beast on the chat, says, "This is the final chance to get in. The price is now 45 cents per coin for the supposed Coinbase crypto coin, and everything up until now has been taken. Once again, I call my friend and say, let's go. We're about to send the money, but this time something makes me stop for a second." So this guy who has all this money was going to put even more money, but this is where he realized, now that he's no longer busy for the weekend, he says, "I see some details that are off. I know one of the Aiden Ross is American, but his phone number is British. Why is that?" For the first time since this chat started, I called Jimmy just to confirm everything. And he says, "What are you talking about?" And that's the punch of my stomach. I say, "Please say that you're fucking kidding me." And I send him a print screen of the chat. So the screenshot of you saw. And he says, he looks at it and it says, "Wow, I don't even know what to say. Please tell me you didn't send them any money." And I reply, 1.25 million. And the realization sinks in. Oh fuck. The first phone call from a few weeks ago was Jimmy, the real Jimmy. The fundraiser for clean water was Jimmy, the real Jimmy. But the person reaching out from this team wasn't from his team, it was a scammer. Jimmy in the chat wasn't Jimmy, it was a scammer. And it was very skillfully orchestrated. All the people in the chat were fake, all the banter was fake, the trip to Africa was fake, you name it. So that's kind of what happened. It's kind of shady, it sucks. Unfortunately he got scammed. And then this is from Doppelbanger in the same thread. He says, "In this case, I think Mr. Beast is offering some reward, but if I were you, I'd wait for him to turn it into a YouTube video where he offers 1 million. So he's just joking there. But this is him replying to a post that Mr. Beast replied, which he says, "Anyone who gives us information that leads to an arrest, I will reward you with $100,000. So that's kind of cool, setting up a bounty against these scammers. I think these are effective ways to combat scams. And then this is where Zach XBT replied, where it kind of led me to discover this situation. He says, "When you're only rewarded by a successful outcome, and not for all of the hours you spend initially with no guarantee of any compensation, makes it not worthwhile." This is what Zach XBT said. I pretty much agree with him. Nothing much more for me to say. And then I was looking up online, and I think this is fairly new. This was his reply from yesterday, and this happened on the 29th. So it's a relatively new story. Sportskita, dude, what's with these names? I don't know how to pronounce it. But Sportskita, this article says, "I will reward you. Mr. Beast offers 100,000. So kind of just bringing more awareness to this. I mean, this is nothing new. We've seen all kinds of crypto scams. And I would say that the sort of crime that's been happening with high or big time crypto investors is getting out of control. This is a more or less crazy one. A few weeks ago, we uncovered the kidnapping of one of the investors' children or, relatives or family association. And, that's probably the worst that we're going to see when it comes to scams or just fraud acts here on crypto and within this investor side of the world. I've talked to some investors before. I've talked to people who are rich, who have their opinions about crypto. A lot of them don't like crypto. These are people who generally, don't understand crypto or don't use it. They oftentimes dismiss crypto as a easy gateway to crime or easy gateway for scammers to get away with crime. And I mean, you can't hate the technology just because it's anonymous and it effectively anonymizes whoever is sending the money. Through that method, it's really easy to get away with scam if you're careful, more careful than, normal. But, we've seen time after time with CoffeeZilla, with Zach XBT, if you follow Zach XBT, they uncover these scams and, they put a lot of hours and time into doing their journalism, but you can still, at the end of the day, track who is doing this, who is scamming who. You just got to follow the wallets. You got to follow the transactions. This is the beauty about blockchain, in my opinion. Even though you don't immediately see who is scamming who or who is the, scammer, you can still track their movement, and that can always lead to an arrest, CoffeeZilla has already, done an amazing job with journalism, and Zach XBT has also, I believe, put people behind the bars with his journalism. It's always possible to catch the scammers. It's only a matter of time, in my opinion. Some do get away, unfortunately, but my point here is I would argue that it is easier to get away with cash money because, that one is untraceable. Like, sure, you got to put it away into banks and everything, but money laundering exists. And if you had to compare both crypto scams and US dollars or fiat currency scams or theft, money laundering, if the scammers know what they're doing and are very sophisticated, they can always just get away with crime by laundering their money. Does that mean we should ban US dollars? Should we ban fiat currency? I don't think so. So for those reasons, I think we're not going to see the end of this anytime soon, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So that's pretty much everything I have to cover with Eric Bergman, with the founder of Great.com, who got scammed, unfortunately. So just stay vigilant, guys. You don't know what could happen tomorrow. You don't know if you could get your money drained. So just always be vigilant. Always practice your PsyOps, like security operations. So our next story, we're going to be talking about the BlockDAG release where they raised a successful round of $387 million, and a whale put $4.4 million of their own money into that blockchain. This is not an endorsement. I'm just here to tell you the news. So this is from AI Invest, and it says BlockDAG's strategic 2,049% bonus and $387 million raise, why it outperforms OKB's volatility and high predictions. You can read more on it if you're seeing it on YouTube. You can click on the article. I'll just read this very briefly, and you guys can kind of tell what's happening. So this is the same article, and it says, in the high-stakes arena of 2025 crypto markets, strategic timing and psychological leverage have become decisive factors in pre-sale success. BlockDAG's $387 million fundraising surge, which is driven by the 2,049% bonus tied to the token 2049 event. First of all, I've never heard of that event. I think it's really interesting how all of this is unfolding. But anyways, this has outmaneuvered both OKB's volatility or volatile token burn and high buyback driven optimism. So OP, I believe this is the token or blockchain layer 2. Doesn't even tell you, which is amazing. All right. Anyways, going back to this. This analysis dissects how BlockDAG's calculated urgency, technological innovation, and investor psychology mastery position it as a standout long-term play. Dude, who wrote this article? I just gotta say real quick, like a lot of what I'm reading here, it's kind of hard to digest because they're using big words. They're mentioning people who I don't even fucking know. I mean, obviously, if you're a viewer, you might know who some of these people are. But anyways, rant over. You know what's kind of happening? They raised a lot of money. Now, we have an investor or a big whale chose that blockchain and put $4.4 million buy-in, which surpasses ADA, Doge, and DOT in August's top crypto coin race. The key takeaway from this quite confusing unfolding series of events for BlockDAG is they raised a large amount of funding, almost 400 million. And then you have this other investor come in and puts $4.4 million of their own money into it. So maybe they know something. It's really hard to say because this is more of a stealth buy, which is oftentimes associated with insider trading or just someone making a potential dumb decision or potentially genius decision. You never know. But if someone is putting large amounts of their own money, that's always something to keep an eye on because they might know something that we don't. This is not financial advice. The only thing I could say is keep an eye out there. So it's really interesting to see how someone is putting a lot of their money in this blockchain that hardly anyone knows about. It even outperformed ADA and Doge, and I think that's the only way people even learned about BlockDAG, which I'm reading the name BlockDAG and I'm pronouncing it and I don't even know anything about it, to be honest with you all. So if whales are vibing and putting their money on something that could potentially give them a return, I think that's something that you should watch closely. I'm not telling you to buy it. I'm simply saying, hey, look into this and let us know what you think. Now, on to our last story, we're going to talk about something that I do know about, and that's Kanye West. I do like his music, although he's recently become this controversial figure who has come out as a white supremacist, which is kind of ironic. But anyways, what's really interesting is that it seems like someone impersonated him and they came out with this YZY token or Yeezy. They came out with this token, which Kanye has come out and said on Instagram saying, hey, I was hacked. I never released this token or I never backed it. So they're lying. Who knows? Anything could happen. I'm just being careful with my words and you should be careful with your actions, or as far as where you put your money. So unfortunately, a lot of people put their money on the Yeezy token, and these are the 1 week results according to Altcoin Daily. And this is on X. It says 11 traders netted $1 million. 11 people made money. 99 traders gained $100,000. However, 51 traders lost $74 million. So are you bullish or bearish on Kanye coin? And this is a screenshot from TradingView, and it shows you the performance. So I'm guessing right before the 21st, it was sitting at about $1.20 almost for the price of one token, which is compared to the Tethered stablecoin. As of this chart, it's less than $1. I can definitely see how people made a lot of money from this, but most of them lost because they were scammed. So right now it's sitting at 52 cents for one token, whereas previously all-time high was at about $1.15 or something. So that's tragic. I mean, that sucks. This is just another Tuesday, unfortunately, for the crypto space. Now, Altcoin Daily does include a source here that comes from Bubble Maps, which it's really interesting to see this. So it says the updated Yeezy numbers are worse than we thought. 70,000 total traders lost money. So about 51,862 lost between $1 and $1,000, or about 5,269 people lost anywhere between $1,000 to $10,000. And then 1,025 people lost anywhere between 10,000 to 100,000, and 108 people lost anywhere between $100 to $1 million. And then 3 people lost over $1 million. Meanwhile, Living Wallets made over $1 million. I'll just read you the numbers for those listening on audio. But yeah, I mean, this is what happens when you have a celebrity scam happen. A lot of people who fail to realize over the years is that celebrities, they don't need a lot of extra money that they have. A lot of them are more focused on their businesses or on movies, whatever it is that they do. And oftentimes that's fine for them. I know at one point Kim Kardashian came out promoting this one token. This was back in 2021 when it was more so the Wild West for crypto, where, you know, celebrities were getting paid a couple thousand or a good amount of money just to promote something that would eventually lead to the scamming of their audience. So we've seen much less of that happen, thankfully, but oftentimes what's happening now is you have scammers who effectively pretend to be said influencer or celebrity, and they still scam people. Now, that doesn't stop a lot of people, unfortunately, from buying the token. A lot of the times people will try to outsmart people by saying, man, right now, I don't know, Yeezy coin is worth 70 cents. I'm going to sell once it reaches $1. So, I mean, all I'm trying to say is scammers are not going to stop people. People are going to still put their money on something, even though it might be a scam, just because they're going to try to outsmart the scammers or outsmart the algorithm, whatever it might be that they're trying to outsmart. So possibly some of them saw that Yeezy coin was worth $1 or $1.15, and they put a little bit of their money, and then Yeezy coin got rugged. Unfortunately, that's what happens a lot of the times in these scams, in these circles. But anyways, that's kind of like what happened with Yeezy coin. So this is from AI Invest as well, and this is from Coin World. It says, Argentina probes crypto scandals tied to president celebrity meme coins. So this is what's interesting. I was a little skeptical because the Argentinian government did scam its people, saying like, oh, hey, you know, we're going to release this Libra token, and it turned out to rug a lot of people, unfortunately. And then the president said, you know, I wasn't involved or whatever. But anyways, according to this, Davis, operating as Kelsier, faces accusations of orchestrating Libra's price surge before dumping holdings, with similar patterns observed in Kanye West's Yeezy meme coin. Investigation will assess potential coordination between Davis and political figures focusing on non-public information access and market manipulation for financial gain. This case highlights Argentina's underdeveloped crypto regulations with the risk of transparency as Milei's pro-crypto stance clash with allegations of the insider trading networks. So one point I forgot to say is Argentina's Frente de Todos opposition reopens probe into President Milei's alleged ties to Libra token scandal, which is linked to Hayden Davis pump and dump schemes. So this is Hayden Davis. You know, I've seen him being interviewed before by CoffeeZilla, and, you know, great video. You should go watch it when you can. But it seems like this person, who was also tied with the release of the Melania meme coin, was also involved with the Yeezy coin, which this guy's kind of everywhere. and seemingly scamming everyone, and people are not doing anything about it. You know, based on what we covered today, there is some correlation with Hayden Davis, with the Yeezy coin, and with the Argentina Libra token that was scammed. You know, this guy's everywhere. You know, I wonder what's going to happen. It's good that they're opening up the case again, but, you know, we'll see what happens. We'll keep you updated when we uncover anything else. But anyways, this has been JR, founder and CEO of Social Market, here with Social Ledger Report. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.